Well, I'm just really happy that the theme of justice is something that can attract people to come here at 8 o'clock in the morning and listen to what I have to say on the subject. And I have a lot to say on the subject, but to kind of focus it down within the time frame I have, I'm gonna structure my talk so that at first I'm gonna talk a little bit about this notion of justice in the legal world, which is where I'm from. And then I'm gonna talk a bit about how creativity fits into it.
Laws, that's more of a scientific thing. Laws are supposed to be objective. And justice, well, justice, that's subjective. Because justice, that's what the individual person thinks, what they think is fair or not. And that can differ. So they want to take justice completely out of the equation and say that has nothing to do with law and with working with law. The only way that justice is a part of law is that you can say, well, in a judgment, for example, the judgment, that's just if it's in accordance with the law. But you wouldn't be able to say, like the naturalist would, well, a judgment can be unfair because it's against a higher principle, if this makes sense. I'll give an example. For example, if you go into law school right now, where I started off, I remember for me it was our first day. We were very excited as students, and the teacher gave a case on the board, a conflict, and was like, so how would you guys solve this? And people were putting up their hands, giving their best bits of how to solve it, and then one person was unlucky enough to put up their hand and say, well, I think it would be more fair if you did this. And the teacher kind of pounced on that and was like, no. In law, fairness has nothing to do with it. You have the facts, you have the law, and then you have working out how the facts fit into the legal framework. Justice is not a part of it. So that's a very positivist way of thinking. And that's the way you mainly think in the Danish law schools. And that's the tradition that I've been brought up with, of how to look at justice. Then if we move forward also with how I've worked with justice, then for example, when I was a prosecutor, if you prosecute a case at court and you have to, at the end, you have to make your plea and have to argue for why you think that the charge should be convicted, I would never start off by saying, well, on behalf of the prosecution service, I think it would be most fair, most just if the person was charged because of X, Y, Z. Saying, I think it would be most fair, most just, that's a big no-go. You would always say, well, this person did that and that and that, and according to the law, that means it has this and this consequence. Then I experienced a different way of thinking about justice, which was when I started working in Amnesty. And Amnesty has a different take on it. For Amnesty, ensuring fairness, ensuring justice, that's one of their values that they have, as a mission. And for me, it was a big change coming into Amnesty and hearing people say, I think this is unfair, or I think it would be more just if we did X, Y, Z. Because I was not used to using that word in such a way. This does not mean that justice is not part of the other worlds, of the world of the prosecution service, or the world of Ministry of Justice, where I also work. But it means that you look at the concept in a different way. In Amnesty, justice is something that you actively go in and work for, and it's something that you use in your rhetoric, whilst in a place like the prosecution service, you also want to serve justice, but you do it by following the law. Because what you say is that that's where justice is already being decided, and the best way to achieve justice is to achieve what the law says. So yeah, so that's, I hope I didn't lose you completely, but that's just to give you an idea of why justice is, it can be quite a complicated thing to use in a legal world. Because there's different understandings of it. But the big question is then, when you go into creativity, how does creativity then fit into this world where even the notion of justice can be a bit controversial or a bit different for people to understand? Well, for me, creativity is a really big part of working with legal policy, because when you work with legal policy, what you're working with is you're working with trying to get people to understand legal arguments who aren't lawyers themselves. And a lot of people can think that the way you speak when you're talking about legal arguments can be kind of quite off-putting, quite maybe technical, and a lot of people, which is very fair, wouldn't necessarily understand what the arguments or what the dilemmas are, because they are all wrapped into this technical lingo that unless you've studied law, you might not necessarily get. And this is where I use creativity as a really important tool, which is to use it to address how to formulate things differently, formulate things in a way that people who have different ways of thinking than a lawyer will then be able to understand. And when I work in Amnesty, this is a huge part of doing legal policy in Amnesty, is that you don't sit as a legal expert or a legal advisor and just go on a roll and go off to all these technical legal arguments. You work together with people from all kinds of different creative backgrounds to be able to translate the legal terms and the legal arguments into something that's much more accessible for everybody else. And another way that I think that creativity is really important is that my experience is that creative minds, they're very good at accepting, okay, this is the way you look at things, this can be the way, the established way of doing things are, but I want to do something completely different. And that's really important when you work with policy, is that to be able to address something in a completely different way. And it's not only important when you work in policy, it's also something that you can use when working in other fields. For example, one of the best stories I've heard of someone using creativity in law was actually a senior prosecutor, a Danish prosecutor called Elise Bangert. I don't know if anybody knows of her, but she was the one who prosecuted a case against a guy called Amagermanden, who, to those who don't know that name, was a man who terrorized Amagerfællet and committed several rapes and murders in that area, hence the name Amagermanden. And one of the big legal disputes in that case was, did he intend to strangle some of the women who died by strangulation, or was he merely choking them and then they died as an unforeseen consequence of being choked? And one of the things that was said was that, well, you know, for someone to die by being strangled, it only takes 3 minutes, and you know, he didn't realize that, you know, they were going to die from his choking. And what Elise Bangert did was that in her case, you know, normally if law is conservative, being in a criminal court and proceeding, that's like really the height of a place where there are very fixed rules, you do things in certain ways, you always say certain phrases when you are doing your legal plea. You know, things are very boxed and ordered. And what she did was that she actually, when doing her legal plea, she took in an egg watch, one of those, you know, small timers with ticking noise. And then, as a part of her plea, when she said it takes 3 minutes to strangle someone to death, she switched on the egg watch to 3 minutes, and then she put it on the table, and then she just stood back, and then she made the whole court wait till the ticking had taken 3 minutes, and the time was out. And that had an effect, because that actually, well, first of all, it meant that he was found guilty of, by purpose, having strangled these people to death. But it was a way of translating a legal argument, or an argument of time, which is quite abstract, into a way that people really related to and understood when they were faced with it in this way. And for me, that's a really great example of how you can use creativity in law and in a legal argument. Another example of how we use it in Amnesty can be that, you know, we work as well as doing a lot of visualizations. So from a legal world, you know, visualizations are not necessarily a big part of it. You know, when you get your textbooks at law school, then great illustrations are not quite a priority. You know, it's very kind of like, you have the text, what else do you need? You know, and so in Amnesty we have a great focus of, well, you need a lot more than just the text if you want to transmit ideas to people. And so here we spend a lot of time also using illustrations and using videos to underpin our arguments, which I think, again, is a great way of how creativity goes hand in hand when working in a legal world. Yeah, so for me, the legal and the creative, they go very well together. For me, justice is a big part of the legal world as well. It's something that I work with when I've been working in Amnesty with human rights a lot. It's something that, even though on a face value, going back to the positivist school of thought, people might be like, no, justice, it's not a part of the legal world, like it's not a part of law, law's objective, justice is subjective. At the end of the day, justice is very much also part of that world, because it interlinks with the legal policy that makes the laws, and in the legal policy, what you work with, it's very much justice. Yeah, and I wanted to know if I have lost people completely, or if they are getting my line of thought. And I just wanted to know, before I stop, to have time for some questions. If any of this, if you have any questions of understanding or something you would like for me to elaborate while I still have the time to do so.